Ford's decision to stop making some cars in the United States is not just a business choice. It's a loud warning that Donald Trump's trade policies may be falling apart. This decision could lead to big job losses in America, higher car prices, and the breakdown of the United States manufacturing system that used to be a source of pride. Ford has long been a symbol of Made in America, but now it can't survive under Trump's America First plan that he proudly promotes. And this isn't just about Ford. It shows a bigger problem. The protectionist policies that were supposed to help American workers are now driving companies out of the country. To understand why Ford is leaving, we have to look closely at the results of Trump's trade tariffs. How did Trump respond to Ford's move? Let's find out in today's video. In early 2025, Trump's administration introduced a bold trade plan. They added a 25% tax on all goods from Mexico and Canada, and a 10% tax on imports from China. These taxes were for all products, no exceptions. The goal was clear: to make companies produce goods in America and protect American jobs. Officials called it a patriotic move to bring back U.S. manufacturing. But the plan didn't work as expected, especially for Ford, a company that's been part of American industry for over 100 years. Now, Ford plans to move some of its production out of the U.S. Ford depends on a global supply chain to build its vehicles. This supply system, built over many years, connects suppliers from different countries. A car needs thousands of parts, like engines from Mexico, steel from Canada, and electronics from China. These parts are not extras, they are essential. Before the tariffs, Ford could buy parts from the best suppliers around the world. This helped them keep costs down and quality high. But now, with high import taxes, those benefits are disappearing. And the money problem is serious. Research shows that about 60% of Ford's parts come from other countries. Take the F-150 truck, for example. It's made in America, but many of its parts, like the transmission from Mexico and steel from Canada, are imported. Because of the tariffs, these parts now cost 25% more. Experts say this could raise the cost of each truck by $2,000 to $5,000. Now, Ford has to make a hard choice: either raise car prices or make less profit. But either way, the company faces big problems. If Ford raises prices, many people, especially working families, won't be able to afford a $40,000 truck that now costs $45,000. With inflation and high interest rates, buying a car is already hard. Higher prices could push people to buy cheaper brands. But if Ford decides to keep prices low, then they'll lose money. To make up for that, Ford might cut jobs or stop investing in new technology. Both choices are bad for Ford's future and for the workers who rely on the company. The tariffs are also making production harder. Making a car is a very precise job. Parts must arrive at the right time to keep factories working smoothly. But now, shipments are being delayed at the borders, which slows down the whole process. For example, if engine parts from Mexico are delayed, a whole assembly line in Texas might have to stop. These delays cost money and make it harder for Ford to deliver cars on time. The supply chain, once a strength, has now become a problem. Because of all this, Ford has decided to move some factories overseas. This isn't a political move. It's about staying alive as a company. If Ford keeps making cars in the United States, the cars will be too expensive to compete in the global market. That could damage the company beyond repair. By moving production to countries without these tariffs, Ford can keep its prices competitive. It's a practical solution to an unrealistic policy. But this shows a major flaw in Trump's plan. The tariffs were supposed to save American jobs by encouraging local production. Instead, they're pushing jobs out of the country. Ford leaving the United States won't just affect its own workers. It will also hurt suppliers, truckers, and small businesses connected to its factories. A policy meant to help the U.S. economy is actually doing the opposite. Some people defend the tariffs, saying short-term pain will lead to long-term gain. They believe companies will eventually open new factories in America. But this idea ignores a key issue. Building a full supply chain in the U.S. takes more than just taxing imports. It needs money, worker training, and years of careful planning. Right now, the plan offers none of that. It punishes companies like Ford without helping them adapt. So moving out becomes the only choice. Ford's decision also shows a bigger trend. More American businesses are rethinking their ties to the U.S. market. For years, companies like Ford stayed in the U.S. because things were stable. But now, unpredictable policies are forcing them to make hard decisions. When a company as historic as Ford feels it must leave, it sends a powerful message. Other manufacturers might soon follow for the same reasons: to save money and survive. That's why Ford's move matters. It's not just one company reacting to a bad policy. It's a sign that the United States might lose its manufacturing strength. The tariffs are supposed to protect workers, but they're actually leading to job losses. The cost will fall on regular Americans, from workers in factories to small shops in towns. And the effects of Ford leaving won't stop at the company's gates. It will hurt communities and the entire economy, impacting lives far beyond Ford's offices. When Trump announced the new tariffs in 2025, his goal seemed clear. He wanted to punish China for unfair trade practices and push foreign countries to change their economic plans. The plan came with a promise. It would protect American jobs. Supporters saw it as a strong move to level the playing field. But what's really happening tells a different story. The financial burden from these tariffs doesn't land on Chinese companies or China's government. Instead, it's American companies and consumers who are paying the price. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods. These taxes are paid by the U.S. companies bringing those goods into the country. For a big company like Ford, this means paying more for the parts and materials they import from other countries. No company can absorb those costs without consequences. To stay profitable, companies raise their prices. And in the end, it's everyday Americans who have to pay more. This turns a plan meant to hit foreign competitors into a heavy cost for the American public. For Ford, the effects are both immediate and easy to measure. The company depends on a complicated network of global suppliers to build its cars. Many of those suppliers are based in China, providing everything from raw steel to high-tech electronics. With the new tariffs in place, production costs go up. A 10% surcharge is added to these imports. Ford's reaction is expected. It passes the extra cost to the buyers. A truck that used to sell for one price now comes with a higher sticker. The increase isn't just due to inflation or supply chain delays. It's also the added burden of trade taxes. This price jump hits middle-class Americans the hardest. These aren't luxury car buyers. They're working people, teachers, electricians, delivery drivers who rely on affordable vehicles. The average cost of a new car in the U.S. is already close to $47,000, and that number has been going up for years due to other economic factors. Tariffs only push it higher. For families watching every dollar, an extra few thousand on a car could mean the difference between buying new or holding on to an older, less reliable vehicle. Over time, this chips away at affordability, which is a core part of the auto market. Ford knows this. Its customer base has always been regular Americans. The company's F-Series trucks, especially popular with working-class drivers, have led sales charts for decades. They stand as a symbol of useful, accessible transportation. But with prices climbing, that history is now under threat. If the very people who helped build Ford's success can no longer afford its vehicles, the company risks losing its foundation. And this goes beyond Ford. It affects an entire industry that employs millions, from manufacturing to sales. Now add the electric vehicle challenge to the mix. Ford has invested billions in EVs, betting that clean energy will define the future of transportation. Models like the F-150 Lightning, the electric version of its famous truck, are key to this strategy. But to stay competitive, these EVs need to stay affordable. A large part of EV components, especially the batteries, come from China, where production is fast and cheap. The new 10% tariff raises the cost of these parts, which means making the F-150 Lightning becomes more expensive. The price of the vehicle could go up by several $1,000s. And that's a big deal. Ford's electric future is already facing serious competition. Tesla, which builds most of its supply chain within the United States, avoiding many import taxes. BYD, supported by China's government, keeping its prices low. Hyundai, which runs highly efficient global operations. Ford, on the other hand, loses its price advantage. A customer looking at the F-150 Lightning may now consider a cheaper competitor instead, slowing Ford's EV momentum at a critical time. And that slowdown doesn't just affect Ford, it also holds back the bigger goal of switching to cleaner transportation, which is something the whole world needs. Higher car prices don't just affect new buyers. They put pressure on the whole auto industry. Dealerships find it harder to move cars as customers hold off on purchases. Lenders become stricter since auto loans carry more risk. Used car values also shift because buyer habits change. Each of these changes adds more strain on everyday people already facing higher living costs. What starts out as a tax on imported goods quickly turns into a broader financial burden felt in homes across the country. And this leads to a serious question. Does Trump fully understand the impact of his tariff strategy? He frames it as a victory for America, a punishment for foreign rivals. But the facts point to a different story. The policy seems to ignore a basic reality. Today's manufacturing is global. Car parts often cross multiple borders before the vehicle is completed. So, when you tax those parts, the pain doesn't hit the foreign supplier as much as it does the American assembler, and ultimately, the buyer. For companies like Ford, and for the country, the price is steep. This gap reveals a larger issue. Trump's trade approach relies on bold statements, but doesn't offer much in terms of practical solutions. Bringing all production back to the U.S. might sound good on paper, but it needs huge investment, new plants, trained workers, and access to raw materials. That all takes serious time and money. In the meantime, firms like Ford are left in a tough spot, trying to adjust without any real support. Instead of reviving the auto industry, these policies are stretching it thin, caught between ambitious political promises and economic reality. In the end, these tariffs aren't giving the United States a major edge in global trade. They're squeezing American family budgets, often hurting the very people Trump said he'd help. As car prices rise and buying options shrink, the average American ends up footing the bill. This growing strain sets the stage for a deeper debate about whether these policies really serve the public they claim to protect. For decades, U.S. businesses and the Republican Party worked hand in hand. Big corporations, from car makers to tech giants, had reliable allies in GOP leaders. They pushed for tax breaks, rolled back regulations, and kept labor unions in check. This strong relationship created a stable business environment. Companies could confidently plan ahead, and politicians got the backing of powerful industries. It shaped American economic policy, boosted growth, and gave corporations a strong voice in Washington. But now that alliance is showing cracks, strained by the fallout of Trump's trade moves. Ford's choice to move production overseas highlighted the rift, and it's exposing deep tensions that could change the direction of U.S. industry moving forward. The Republican Party, especially during the Reagan era, had long presented itself as the champion of free markets. Reagan's push for global trade deals and fewer regulations helped create a world where companies could thrive. For automakers, that meant cheaper parts, easier access to international suppliers, and better prices for consumers. The Republican Party's support extended into real-world action, like the 2008 bailout led by President George W. Bush. This move rescued General Motors and Chrysler from collapse. Actions like these helped build confidence. Businesses believed they could rely on Republican leadership to put economic growth first, instead of getting lost in ideological debates. But now, that trust is starting to fade. Ford's open criticism of Trump's tariffs shows a clear break from that past. Ford, a longtime symbol of American innovation since it was founded in 1903, has spoken out. The company says the 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada, alongside a 10% tax on Chinese imports, put its future at risk. These tariffs disrupt the global supply chains Ford depends on, leaving it with a hard choice: either raise prices and lose competitiveness or move operations elsewhere. When a major player like Ford challenges a Republican president, it suggests something deeper is changing. Other car makers like General Motors and Stellantis are also uneasy, though they've kept their criticism quiet. That silence doesn't mean they agree. It shows how carefully they're treading in today's unpredictable political climate. At the heart of the issue is a shift in the Republican Party's core values. What once was a strong belief in economic freedom is shifting toward protectionism. Trump's trade agenda, meant to protect American workers, now pressures companies to keep all their production within U.S. borders. But there's no clear strategy to actually make that possible. Building full domestic supply chains would take huge investments in factories, worker training, and infrastructure. But current policies don't offer the funding or support for that. Instead, the tariffs act like a blunt tool. They raise business costs without fixing the real problems. To many companies, this doesn't feel like support at all. It feels more like being forced to trade profitability for political appearances. That puts businesses in a tough spot. In today's global economy, success comes from efficiency and adaptability. But the administration's demands force companies to choose national loyalty over smart economics. Ford's choice to shift production overseas wasn't about abandoning America. It was a reaction to policies that punished them for staying. Other industries, from electronics to farming, are facing the same tough decisions. The bigger issue is the growing sense that the Republican Party, once seen as a reliable ally to business, is out of step with today's economic realities. And the timing couldn't be worse. The United States is still healing from the economic damage caused by the pandemic. Supply chains are fragile, and shortages in key materials like semiconductors continue to hurt production. Inflation is squeezing both shoppers and companies, and many businesses are holding back on making new investments. In this kind of situation, partnership between government and industry is critical. Policies should create certainty, not add more hurdles. But right now, the government's approach risks driving away the very companies that are needed for recovery. And the impact isn't just financial. It also weakens corporate America's political voice. For years, business leaders helped shape national policy by working closely with lawmakers, through lobbying and partnerships. But when companies like Ford start to feel sidelined, their willingness to participate fades. That means fewer policies shaped by industry knowledge and more decisions that miss the mark. We're already seeing this cycle play out. Tariffs lead companies to move operations elsewhere. This fuels public frustration, which then pushes politicians to use even more aggressive rhetoric. Breaking this pattern requires mutual understanding, but that trust is disappearing fast. Another issue is the message this sends to the wider economy. Ford pulling back shows that even long-established American companies aren't safe from policy shifts. Smaller businesses, those without the means to quickly adapt, face even greater challenges. And investors are paying attention. If political uncertainty becomes the new normal, they may choose to put their money in countries with more stable environments. This could seriously alter the economic landscape, pulling investment and innovation away from the United States. This divide also puts pressure on the identity of the Republican Party. Historically, it tried to balance support for businesses with appeals to working-class voters. Trump leans hard into the latter, using tariffs to signal strength and patriotism. But in doing so, he risks driving businesses away, a major source of funding, jobs, and economic messaging. Without business support, the party's promises, like creating more jobs, get harder to keep. The result? A growing rift that could split the base, turning workers against the companies that employ them. The stakes for ordinary Americans are huge. Strong industries mean steady jobs, lower prices, and healthy local economies. When businesses and government clash, those benefits start to crumble. Ford's decision is a clear warning when policies ignore how the economy really works. It's not just corporations that suffer. Real lives are disrupted. Factories aren't just buildings. They support entire communities, from schools to families. As the traditional bond between corporate America and the Republican Party weakens, the effects will go far beyond corporate boardrooms. This widening gap raises a critical question. Can the United States rebuild its industrial power without working closely with its major companies? That answer depends on whether leaders can align political goals with real-world needs. Ford moving production overseas should be a wake-up call. If policy doesn't change, more companies will follow. President Trump's tariffs, pitched as patriotic and protective, are actually undermining the very industries they aim to support. This isn't just Ford's problem, it strikes at the heart of the American economy. Are we fighting for real jobs or falling for empty slogans? Trump's bold approach, while strong in tone, may be quietly weakening U.S. industry from within. Americans deserve better. They need to listen to what businesses are saying and demand smarter, more forward-thinking policies that keep jobs and innovation here at home. Investing in worker training and new technologies can help rebuild what the tariffs are tearing down. Ford isn't the first to leave, and unless action is taken, it certainly won't be the last. The choice is clear: either secure America's economic future, or stand by as its industrial foundation slowly fades away.